Episode 60. The Door at 307. The door has never been hidden. That is the truth Ethan understands first, and it unsettles him more than any revelation ever could. Nothing concealed this place. No force guarded it. No system encrypted its location. The door existed openly, patiently, in the same way gravity exists openly, waiting for someone who no longer expects mercy from it. Ethan does not discover the door. He arrives at it, not physically at first, conceptually. The sensation begins as orientation, not pressure, not silence. A subtle alignment like the way a compass settles when interference stops. For the first time since Season 1, the world does not resist his attention or redirect it. Time is not watching him now. It is allowing him to look. Ethan stands several streets away from where he chose to stay, containment loosened just enough for this purpose. Not as a reward, not as compensation. Anchors are sometimes permitted observation. Structures allow inspection once load stabilizes. The city is calm tonight, not peaceful, functional. The past has receded. The present holds. Corrections are no longer snapping sharply at the edges. The system has regained tolerance, which means this moment is possible. 307, Ethan feels the direction. Not forward, not backward, through. He does not hurry. He does not hesitate. Urgency and hesitation are both forms of leverage, and leverage is no longer part of him. He follows the orientation the way one follows gravity when falling stops being frightening. The alley is ordinary. That is intentional. Trash bins. Old brick. A security light that flickers inconsistently because no one bothered to replace it. And at the far end, a service door painted so many times its original shape has softened, like an object worn smooth by centuries of hands. The door. No markings. No hum. No distortion. No indication that it is anything other than what it appears to be. That is the first lesson. Important things do not announce themselves. Announcements attract misuse. Ethan stops several steps away. 307, the minute arrives gently. Not heavy. Not blunt. Not fractured. The city does not pause. Cars pass at the mouth of the alley. A voice laughs somewhere nearby. A siren rises and fades. Nothing acknowledges significance. And yet Ethan knows this is the only access point that never moved. All others were temporary. Pockets formed by strain, loopholes born from overload, negotiation gaps created by human cleverness. Those were side effects. This is structural. Ethan reaches for the handle. The metal is warm, not heated, occupied. The door does not resist him, but it does not open. Ethan does not pull harder. Force is meaningless here. He closes his eyes, not to concentrate, to subtract. He releases the last remaining assumptions he has carried about time. Not fear, not anger, innocence. The belief that time should care in human terms. That fairness must feel kind. That suffering implies injustice. That systems owe comfort. These ideas dissolve quietly without argument. At 307, something aligns inside him. Time is not moral. Time is accounting. Ethan opens the door. There is no transition, no tunnel, no void, no cinematic shift. He steps forward and simply is elsewhere. The door closes behind him without sound. Ethan does not turn around. He already knows it will not open again for him. Not because he is forbidden, because repetition would introduce imbalance. Consistency is not punishment. It is stability. The space he enters is not a room. It is not empty either. It is balanced. The ground beneath his feet feels solid without being material. The air has no temperature but carries sound without echo. There are no walls, yet the space is clearly bounded. Not by edges but by function. Ethan understands where he is without needing explanation. This is not time. This is where time accounts. A ledger, but not written. A structure, but not built. Moments exist here, not arranged by chronology, but by cost. Dense clusters of consequence sit beside thin, nearly weightless instants. Entire lives compress into nodes where imbalance once accumulated. Other moments barely register at all. Ethan does not see events play out. He perceives weight. This is fairness. Not moral fairness. Economic fairness. Every negotiation honored. Every cost collected. Every lie rerouted but never erased. Every sacrifice accepted without sentiment. Nothing here is judged. Nothing is forgiven. Everything is balanced. Ethan feels the truth settle into him with painful clarity. Time never hunted humans. It hunted pressure. Humans simply stood where pressure accumulated. Selection was never personal. Optimization was never cruel. Containment was never punishment. They were responses to imbalance. And imbalance does not care who creates it. At 3:07, Ethan feels the last illusion fall away. The idea that suffering must imply wrongdoing dissolves. Some suffering is simply arithmetic. That realization hurts more than fear ever did, because it removes the comfort of blame. The ledger does not care who you are, only what you cost. Ethan senses the door behind him conclude, not vanish, complete. Knowledge without leverage is safe. That is the rule. He understands now why he was allowed here. He can no longer exploit this understanding. Containment removed ambition. Payment removed desire. Choice collapsed alternatives. There is nothing left to bargain with. So knowledge is permitted. Ethan steps forward. Not deeper, clearer. He sees how every season converged here. Season 1, observation, awareness of imbalance. Season 2, optimization, correction through efficiency. Season 3, transaction, balance through cost. None of it contradicted the others. Humans only perceived contradiction because they insisted on narrative morality. Time does not tell stories. It balances equations. Ethan does not feel anger. He does not feel relief. He feels something colder and heavier. Understanding. The loss of innocence is not despair. It is clarity stripped of comfort. At 3:07, Ethan understands the final law of Season 3 completely. Time can be negotiated with. Time can be traded with. Time can even be resisted temporarily. But time cannot be cheated. Not because it is intelligent, but because it remembers everything in weight. The door opened because Ethan no longer wanted to use it. That is the system's final safeguard. He stops moving. Not because he cannot go on. Because once Part 2 begins, there is no innocence left to lose. And that cost cannot be repaid. The ledger does not speak. That is the first thing Ethan learns after the door concludes behind him. No voice explains. No rule is recited. No justification is offered. Explanation would imply persuasion, and persuasion would introduce bias. The ledger only shows, not images, relations. Ethan senses how moments interlock, how costs propagate across lives without regard for intention. A small decision here thins a future elsewhere. A delayed correction accumulates interest until it must be paid in bulk. A sacrifice anchors a region long enough for others to pass safely through. Nothing is moral. Everything is balanced. He understands now why the system tolerated lies but never absorbed them. Lies reroute debt. They do not erase it. They make accounting harder, not kinder. And difficulty always increases price. Ethan feels the weight of his own path within the structure. Not as guilt, as placement. He is neither central nor peripheral. He occupies a node that has been resolved, paid, fixed. That is why he can see this. Knowledge without leverage remains inert. At 3:07, the structure tightens, not closing, not shrinking, finalizing. Like a book whose binding sets once the glue dries. The ledger does not add new entries here. It reconciles. Ethan becomes aware of a boundary ahead. Not a wall. A limit of relevance. Beyond it, understanding would become interference. The system does not allow observers to become operators. He stops. The ledger does not ask him to leave. It simply ceases to include him. And that is how the exit occurs. Not as expulsion, as completion. The space resolves into the alley again. Brick, trash bins, the same flickering light. The same ordinary service door now indistinguishable from every other door that never mattered. Ethan stands alone. At 3:07, the minute passes. Nothing marks it. That is the cost settling. The city sounds normal. Not calm. Normal. People argue. A bus hisses to a stop. Somewhere a glass bottle breaks. Life continues with its familiar inefficiencies. Ethan feels a hollow where innocence once lived. Not pain. Absence. He does not feel superior. He does not feel enlightened. He feels finished with a certain kind of belief. The belief that fairness should feel humane. He walks out of the alley and into the street. No one looks at him twice. The system does not grant witnesses to those who carry understanding without utility. As he moves, he notices something subtle. Time does not lean on him anymore. No routing. No bypass. No use. He is not an anchor now. He is a remainder. That is not exile. It is integrity. At 3:07, Ethan passes a couple arguing softly over a decision they cannot agree on. He hears the branching possibilities in their voices. The system will let them choose. One future will collapse. Another will survive. Neither will be kind. Both will be fair. Ethan keeps walking. He does not intervene. Intervention would imply preference. Preference would imply leverage. He no longer has either. Days pass. The city continues to harden gently. Tolerance is tighter than before, but not yet cruel. Negotiations still occur, but fewer. Costs collect faster with less finesse. People feel it as impatience, as a world that seems to demand decisions sooner and forgive them less. Season 4 is forming quietly, not in rebellion, in collision. Ethan watches it assemble without urgency. At 3:07, he realizes he no longer checks the time. The minute has lost its symbolic weight. It was never a portal. It was a metronome for imbalance. Now the rhythm has been internalized. He understands the system's fairness fully now, and that understanding costs him the last comfort he carried. Hope, not the desire to live. The belief that cleverness could save everyone. Time can be negotiated with. Time can be traded with. Time can even be strained. But time cannot be cheated. Cheating assumes a blind spot. The ledger has none. One evening, Ethan returns to the street where he chose to stay. He does not step into the place he was fixed. That role concluded. Containment was local and temporal. It served its purpose and released. The city breathes evenly here now. The past is quiet. The present holds. People pass without hesitation. Someone else will be asked someday. Not because the system is cruel. Because balance is ongoing. Ethan understands the final truth of Season 3 then, not as doctrine but as lived reality. Fairness is not kindness. Kindness is expensive. Fairness only requires balance. He turns away and walks toward home, not toward a destiny, not away from one. Just forward, inside a single lane that no longer branches for him. At 3:07, the day ends without ceremony. No doors open. No doors close. The system does not acknowledge understanding. It only acknowledges cost. Ethan lies down and sleeps without dreams. The ledger remains intact. The world continues. Season 3 closes not with victory, not with despair, but with clarity heavy enough to carry into war. Because once innocence is gone, resistance is no longer naive. It becomes necessary, and time, finally understood, will meet it without sentiment.